And then, we saw the majority of that film about current conditions in parts of West Africa, especially the Ivory Coast, with child labor. And so that's one part of the production side. But y'all know the rest of the production to make chocolate, right? We have to go through all the steps of processing it, and who's doing that labor. And so this brings us to the end of this book, right? We've gone all the way through it. These last couple of chapters, it's my first time to teach this book, and it's a lot. The last couple of chapters are very Robertson has these interviews that she does of women factory workers. She gives a very detailed history of Roundtree. But, after reading it, there were some senses that I felt like, well, I don't know if they really know what Roundtree is. And so, it's a chocolate factory, and it has this sort of place, but it might be helpful to, let me turn this on, to kind of look at some of the basics of it. And ideally, what I would have done is had brought in some Roundtree chocolates, because there's some brands that there's some products that but not this time. Oh gosh, that's going to brighten up surely. Yeah. The bulb's not dying. Oh hi. So, what are the big candy manufacturers here in the States?
Nestle, Mars.
Yeah. Nestle's. No. Well, where do you think Nestle was founded, like the origin of Nestle?
The Ivory Coast.
Huh? Yeah, it's a Swiss company. So you think of Swiss chocolate. Well, Nestle is like the big, giant bear of Swiss chocolate. With all these other sort of things they've done that don't directly have to do with chocolate. So, but there's this tendency to think of Nestle as being American. No, it's not. That's definitely a European company. And then, what were the other ones you named? Hershey's? Absolutely. And in fact, next class, we'll get into that. So we're moving into this part that I'm doing right now. We looked at sort of big production, moved into big production in Africa, especially for these big companies. And we'll spend a little time with thinking about industrialization, industrial foods, and that sort of thing. Looking at chocolate companies as part of that, but we'll look at some other materials that look at it in a very broad perspective. And the other one is Mars. Yeah. That's a branch. I'd have to look at it, but it's a branch of a U.S. company, and so that was one of those things that was completely made up to be appealing, and be able to have a very high price point for the chocolates, mostly because of the name and the image, not necessarily the quality of the chocolate going into it. Yeah, it's a brand. It's a U.S. company. I'd have to look. Some of these things have been, and that's part of this really vicious history that you'll read about in, like, candy is one of the harshest businesses. Fierce competition, a lot of concern about secrets, like for these big industrial chocolate makers, tours of the factory used to be kind of commonplace, not so much anymore. And there's much less public access to see what's going on. And so then, with a kind of a couple weeks of looking at industrial production, then we'll move into fine and craft production and sort of see the contrast there. But right now we're going to stay with the big producers. So, Roundtree, had y'all heard that name before? Yeah. Not so much. One of the big three. So you go to Great Britain.
Is Cadbury in the UK too?
Yeah. So Cadbury and Roundtree are the English, like the British. I mean, thought of being very, very English, and Nestle is more, Western Europe, Swiss. Okay. And so here's an early. This is like around the 1920s when these pictures taken. Roundtree chocolates. And so the whole book that Robertson wrote is all about Roundtree, basically, and how Roundtree develops and the experiences in these factories particularly. So what are the products that you know? So Roundtree develops Kit Kat bars. Yeah, exactly. But you all know what Kit Kat bars are. And then the other thing is, so that was in the 30s, and then Rolo candies, the caramel in the center, a little bit later. And then the other one that I knew, if you look in the mint section, like where the candy nuts are after 8s, yeah. So I didn't realize that.
My grandparents always had them in the refrigerator, and I would sneak more than one because I wanted one.
Yeah. And then what they're very famous for are they're chocolates, but these Smarties candies, and in Europe that was a big break into the scene that way, and then developed chocolate later on, slightly later on. Okay, so this is eventually eaten up by larger companies, but you still see the Roundtree name on a few things. So we'll get into this also with the U.S. companies, because there's some interesting contrasts in sort of the nature of the family, the nature of the business, the characters involved. But in this case, it's a Quaker. A Roundtree, the founder, is a Quaker, and part of Quaker morality is to encourage moral behavior and the people around you and in your neighborhood and your community and that sort of thing. So those sorts of Quaker ethics come through. Does anyone know? Anyone familiar with Quaker faith? Some of the things that they really care about now. A little bit, yeah.
Very kind of hardline, pretty not into aesthetics too much. Like, it's very religious. They're just strong in faith.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so they encourage independence, but community-minded at the same time. That you should pull your own weight, and contribute. Yeah.
I think Quakers have a non-violence thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Extremely important. Not a very strong support or ethic that nonviolence is the way. So they don't support war efforts because they don't support any war. They're, as far as within the faith, that's so we can look a little bit at the growth trajectory of the company, which you get senses of in the book, but it's kind of nice to have just a simple timeline. And then look at how things change, particularly with the size and scope of it, and then how gender changes over the gender of the laborers and the experience of the laborers. So what you have is, it starts out in the 1860s, and it's founded in this town of York. York is a very has Roman, like it was a Roman town in England. So very, very old town, lots of old architecture around, and thought of as a very sort of very English place, like solid, kind of plain, prototypical English place in some ways. So they start out more in candy, 1880s. They have these fruit candies that are in competition with what the French were making at the time that were very popular across Western Europe. So this is what you start to see at the beginning of these businesses. And this, you can take it into almost any food item, where there'll be this sort of issue about branding and making, so what does it matter that the fruit candy's made by a British company versus a French company? There'll be claims of quality and all these sorts of associations that they make for that. And then, a lot of like worry about stealing ideas and actual stealing of ideas. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that, like, you said the candy industry is, like, so fierce, yet, like, we don't see, like, different versions of Kit Kats. Like, there's just the Kit Kat and, like, like, sodas, like, they're competing and trying to copy each other. Like, we have Sprite, we have 7-Up from 2 different companies, but, like, there's only, like, one version of Kit Kat, one kind of Snickers. Like, they're not trying to...
Yeah, but you get into things like Mounds versus Almond Joy. That was like an incredibly hostile happening.
The war.
It was.
So isn't it like the same company?
No, not now. I think it's still.
I thought it was the same. Just Almond Joy has an almond.
It was when it started. It was two different like. And that's how they could, because there were things about copyright and all of these sorts of claims that people stake and things legally too. And can you make something that looks just like Kit Kat and call it something else and not get into trouble? Yeah. There was a big legal battle over purple. The color of purple that Cadbury's uses in their packaging, they said was their trademark, like their signature color, and that some other candy maker used a purple for their product. I'd have to pull up, I can't remember the specific of who made the infraction, but the court upheld it like that. That's Cadbury purple. Yeah.
How can you claim a color?
I know. It's just like, they're mean.
I went to the Cadbury factory in New Zealand. That's one of the big chocolates there, and their the big silos that they have. I don't know if they're actually silos, but they're purple, and you can see them from like miles away.
No, that purple's big. That's important. So there, just the color, much less like the shape of the bar and the stuff that's in it and all that sort of thing. There's all kinds of fighting that's happening. So anyway, these Quakers copy this French candy and make a lot of money from it, basically. And they use that to buy the equipment, the machinery to extract the cocoa butter from the chocolate. And so, getting enough capital was what they needed to make that transition into chocolate making the way they wanted to. And they were doing that to compete with the Nestle bar at the time, which was had a low amount of cocoa butter in it. And so it was seen as a very like pure chocolatey kind of taste. And so they're doing that just to compete. And cocoa essence. And then that product it gets a huge market share. It's like 1/4 of the chocolate bars sold become this, the Roundtree chocolate.
Is it possible to buy like just the cocoa butter compared to like the cacao? Like, is it possible to buy it as a product?
And I really haven't talked about that much, but you know what cocoa butter goes into? Yeah. Lotions. big time. Cosmetics in general.
So is it really not for eating?
You can eat it.
It's
Yeah.
like coconut oil. Like you can cook with coconut oil.
Uh-huh.
And like hair products.
Yeah, hair product. I mean, all sorts of beauty products.
I feel like Walmart has those like, you know those push-up, like it's like pure cocoa butter for like
Uh-huh.
99 cents. It comes in like a cardboard tube.
Oh, that sounds like I need to bring it into class. So that's where a lot of the cocoa butter ends up going into that sort of market.
Is that being used then just for like chocolate? Is cocoa butter?
There can be cocoa butter and white chocolate. White chocolate.
It's hot chocolate.
We'll have a whole discussion of white chocolate at some point. Right now we got to think about these factories and who's in them. but we'll definitely get to white chocolate. Yeah, so it grows, and so it's in town, like the factory, the initial factory, and it starts out with male labor for the most part, running these big pieces of equipment basically, and then as the company grows, it actually moves to the outskirts of the city. But Robertson really details how they try to make it seem very much like they're still in the middle of York, that they don't abandon the city by any means. And then it's taken over by Nestle. So all of these things that you're familiar with, you'll know them as Nestle brands. And an interesting thing. So at around a little bit after the factory really grows, you can imagine, and this is something that's discussed in some ways, but you have this increasing demand. You need a really steady supply, reliable supply of cacao to make the chocolate with, right? And what's the surest way, in some ways, to do that is to own those farms. And then all of that's going to come to you. So, the economic term for that is vertical integration. So, it doesn't actually happen in a lot of foods. It's very, like bananas is this one freaky case where, there's really very intense vertical integration where the banana companies owned all of even the shipping lines to move the bananas from their plantations in Central America to their ports, their warehouses that were in the ports, and then, the rail, and even the rail lines within the foreign country in Honduras or Costa Rica or whatever, they own those rail lines as well as their land. So very intense vertical integration with that. Other products like sugar, citrus, that sort of thing, not, it's just not integrated in the same way. But this happens with some of the big, the industrial chocolate companies. So what does that mean? Who's the workforce for Roundtree at the turn of the century? Who's that whole workforce that they're employing? Themselves, but who? I mean, come on. Who are they paying?
Certainly not the child laborers.
Well, how much do you think? So there the few people in the smallish factory, and then a big part of it is managing that labor in these West Indian producers. Paying them what they pay them. And they own the machinery, the equipment, all of that, the land. So, now how much do the people working in the company know about where the cacao is coming from? Well, they have some education programs. Well, I'll get to that in a second. A little bit about the city of York. Here we go. Connecting, and Robertson does this nice job of looking like on a small scale and then increasingly larger scales. That they very much, and this is part of this Quaker ethic, wanted to connect the people who worked for them to the community that they're in the middle of, or at the edge of. And so this is an example of a monthly newsletter that was printed just for the workers in the factory. And it would have all these sorts of articles about York history, things going on in York, and humanitarian sorts of activities, and it would have some education about cacao farming to some degree, that they would know that the products were coming from these places. And then another way scale of connection too was like to the nation as a whole, and to be seen as doing a patriotic duty and connecting, like by making these chocolates, the people working in the factory were feeding soldiers. They were connecting, they were representatives. They were making objects that were representative of the British Empire, and these were going out to other places. So there was a lot of pressure about quality, because not just to do a good job, but because this is how other people are viewing and judging Great Britain by its products. And then the company also made all sorts of efforts to kind of connect to patriotism and the political system by, making special tins of chocolates that were commemorative of events going on with the British royal family, that sort of thing. And the sending the chocolates to the soldiers in the Boer War was at under the order of Queen Victoria, and it was seen as such a high quality product that was sent to sustain these soldiers. And the other thing too is the way that the chocolate was described and sort of imagined was as being representative of like British values, English values in particular. First, all British chocolate. Is this all British? You look like no. How's it not British?
It's not being made in Britain. Cacao can't be made in Britain, just due to temperature. So it can't be all made there. The way you vaguely work it out is if the West Indies is a British colony, like it's kind of British. That's as far as you get.
Are those cacao farmers British citizens? In most of the cases, these are not. Maybe, but in most of the cases, we could argue that. So what's making it chocolate like a real thing, the substantial thing, is the processing in the plant, and that labor of those people in that factory. And so it's seen as a, symbolically, and also kind of very clearly economically, like this is a big industry that's growing, and people across different parts of Europe are buying these things. It's not just a local little candy shop. And so the taste of it, and here's where we get back into these issues of taste and how it connects people to place. it's described as being, you know, solid and plain, like a good English person, English gentleman. Solid and plain, like very trustworthy. You can count on this to have, you know, not any of those fancy weird tastes. It's a British taste. Yeah, right. And then it gets into, you know, we'll get into some of the other things, you know, what makes that British taste. Okay, so what I brought, so there's this connection of York with this chocolate producing and all of that. I didn't bring Roundtree chocolates in. I think I have enough of these. I don't have to cut them. If we get short, what I did bring in, we can have some of them, are these York peppermint patties. And this is one of those cases, it's actually more interesting than tasting just the Roundtree Nestle thing, because it's one of those cases where it is, this is not Halloween like. This is first produced in 1920 in York, Pennsylvania, so it's part of that kind of chocolate making that's going on in that region. And but I think that the name York, well, you've already had how many decades of York being associated with chocolate in England? And so I think there was already a space for chocolate from York and chocolate named York to make sense and be, you know, popular. And so this little ice cream cone company makes the mint patty, and then this the other company, Peter Paul, buys it and distributes it.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Pennsylvania.
oh wow. You must have known all of this.
Yeah, I also live really close to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
So there's just a lot of
Lots of chocolate and the smell.
Yeah.
Do they still make, is there still a factory there? Do they do anything?
In York?
Uh-huh.
No, I think they actually,
They moved everything.
I think they used the Hershey factory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, open it up. I want you to taste it and tell me what you taste. Because this is a piece of candy it's named after the place, right? It's emblematic. And it's the same kind of thing that Roundtree was trying to do with some of their products and make it emblematic of York, England.
It's coconut.
Mexico.
Huh? It was made in Mexico.
Looks like coconut.
Coconut?
Huh? No, it's okay. Kind of looks like coconut though. Just a little bit.
So what's the first taste that hits you with this?
Like a mint taste.
The mint and lemon chocolate.
The mint and the chocolate. And then what sort of flavors of the chocolate come through? And does the flavor change as you
It
eat
says
it?
it's covered in dark chocolate, but it doesn't taste like really good quality dark chocolate.
It's not
kind of
like the
comparable
bitter
to a Hershey bar.
Uh-huh. It tastes like a Hershey bar. What did you say?
It's not like the bitter kind of dark chocolate.
Yeah, it's got a fair bit of. Everybody get one? Do we have-
Too sweet.
Okay. Just enough. All right. Anything else about it? Where would you eat one of these?
At my grandma's restaurant, they have one for when you leave. It's just kind of mint and chocolate with like a palate cleanser. You know, like the Amesman's olive oil. That's what it's for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you ever eat it at the beginning? If it's a palate cleanser?
Like between courses, sometimes you have the mints in it.
Mhm.
Maybe like having, like, I don't know, kind of like a picnic.
Mhm. Like a snack, sort of a little something to wake you up.
Maybe just like start eating up.
Uh-huh. So there's something that with mint we associate with cleanliness, right? Cleaning, freshness. Do we associate that with chocolate?
No. Well, we didn't at first.
Yeah, now there's, but in fact, like the 16th century talked about chocolate as being refreshing, you know, and kind of the same way we talk about now. Fire talked about yeah. After 8, they're very thin. So here's where the difference is. Now, how do you think, I should have examples, because the difference in the taste might be, if it were half that width, you know, that size.
Very tiny, and it's almost like a gooey inside. Like it's not like this at all. It's almost like whenever you pull it apart, it's you out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can't sort of break it and let it, like the way I cut for one.
Mm-hmm.
It would, in one of those after 8 mints, the mint would seep out. So what does that imply? It's not solid. You can count on it to keep itself up. It would be, Roundtree's probably rolling in his grave. Oh no, don't say that about mine.
Are those English?
What?
The after eights?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not
I've
anymore.
never even seen these like in store.
I'll look for some, because I've seen them in the grocery
You
store.
can buy them at Fresh Market.
Yeah, okay. Oh, what's there? But surely at, I think I've seen them at Kroger's.
Yeah, they do have a Kroger too.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can think about those sort of physical properties. If it's got a gooier center, it means you're not hanging around with this thing half eaten, like it's supposed to be all in there. And then you can think also of the proportion of mint to chocolate. What's the dominant taste that you're going to get? It's the chocolate. So in here, it's this blast of mint.
Obviously, the chocolate is
Yeah. So you have this competition playing upon what people, what's sort of out there known about the food and that sort of thing, and finding those niches to grow. Yeah, this is what I think is really funny. Dark became synonymous with dark chocolate and peppermint. Well, these aren't, it had already happened, but across the Atlantic. Okay. So for this last bit of the class, we'll think about how many steps are there to making chocolate?
9.
I think I managed to put 10 in there. Yeah.
I was close though. But if you round up, I'm right. So.
And so we got to about stage midway through, right? Because there's all the, and what Robertson's book is kind of silent about is many of those really important steps in establishing the texture and the taste and all of that, as far as the conching and that, the grinding, the conching, and that sort of thing. and partly because she's interested in this issue of what women were doing in particular, because they're the majority of the workers. So thousands of women. What sort of jobs are they doing? They're doing clerical, managerial jobs. But what do you think these women in chocolate factories are doing? Like, what are they spending most of their time on?
Making chocolate.
Yeah, but how are they making it?
Oh, roasting machine.
What are you doing in the molding factory?
Yeah.
Just shaping it?
Yeah, the molding, putting the couverture, like the chocolate covering, if it's a filled something, shaping it, decorating it, and putting it into a box. A lot of detail work, actually. And when I think about that, and so Robertson to some degree tracks some of the changes, because you have this shift in more automation. Have any of y'all had a factory job? Or like assembly line work? What did you do?
Like sort of. It was like building binders for corporate. Like the company made furniture for offices. Like the most boring.
And so what did you have to do? What was your
There was
part?
like a line of people assembling big binders of like purchasing information.
Okay, so you're putting the papers together
Somebody was
and.
stacking the papers, somebody was like putting away the paper. Yeah, it was really bad.
And did y'all have a chance to shift positions? Okay, so if you're I just can't do any more, rings through the paper rolls. You could not necessarily such an option here. If you're the one doing the piping on the thing, you're probably doing that for. And how long of a day do you think these people work? Yeah, 10-hour work days, pretty common. I always think. Did somebody have their hand up before? I thought I saw a hand. I always think of this video. Are any of y'all familiar with I Love Lucy? Yeah. Lucy, you've got some splaining to do. So part of her struggle too is this idea, career and what she should be doing and work, the nature of her work. I just love this scene. I'm sorry. Well, you'll see this scene and then you'll think, well, how long did she work in a chocolate factory?
What are you doing up here? I thought you were downstairs boxing chocolate. Oh, they kicked me out of there fast. Why? I kept pinching them to see what kind they were. The fourth department I'd been in. Oh, I didn't do so well either.
All right, girls. Now, this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, this is easy. Yeah, we can handle it, okay? Listen, Ethel, I think this... I think we're fighting a losing game.
for a minute about what that just showed, though. So, yeah.
They use that in so many other things, like, I think they use that in the show Drinking Josh. I don't know if any of you like watch that show. They also, I don't know, they use that in a lot of like spin-offs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like a classic. I didn't know it came from I Love Lucy.
Oh, yeah. So, who were the workers? They were all women, right? And so, you have the strong woman supervisor getting them to do their job, right? And then, and with factory work, doing that sort of thing, however many hours a day, you can become very skilled. And Robertson has these, the people she interviewed talked about how they liked some of the work because they could do it really efficiently. Like they could get it done and they felt like they could accomplish a lot. But the downside is when you have these increasing demands and feeling that pressure, and then of course you get into this repetitive motion and the sort of physical effects that has. Yeah.
I used to work at Tobin's and I used to have to hand wash dishes from the restaurant. There were other people with me, we were the phones people, so I can relate to that because we'd have to answer the phone, do you have to wash the dishes? And you'd just be like, you develop the skill to wash dishes so quickly, but then the owner would be yelling at you, like, you gotta answer the phones, you gotta wash dishes faster, and it's so stressful. It was the worst job I've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was awful, so I relate to that.
I had one, did I tell you about the student who worked at Beer Notes? And she's like, that was the worst. And then, she was in the part where she was packing, she's supposed to be filling the packages and getting those. So it was this sort of thing. And she said, finally there were just these nuts shooting out at me, and I couldn't get them all in, and she quit. She couldn't stand it. She didn't want to eat
all the dishes to the sinks, and they would fall over, and there'd be salad everywhere. Yeah. And your wrist would hurt from just washing. Yeah. You'd be covered in water.
And there's no time. I mean, so here it's this stress on time and efficiency.
5-minute breaks.
Yeah. And so there's no way that you can, change your clothes or make any kind of adjustments for your own comfort.
5-minute breaks. I had to there's gotta be some kind of labor law that's against that. That's not right.
There are probably lots of legal things going on.
Important harassments.
No, I don't work there.
Yeah, you're not even working
there. I don't work there anymore.
Well, this is before color. It was filmed. The later one, she moves out to the suburbs and then she has color. But early on, finding that factory job. And the other thing to know that's kind of mirroring what was going on, Lucy and Ethel, are they freewheeling single women trying to these are married women, and there's a very important sort of hierarchy and preference in hiring and that sort of thing that happens in the Roundtree factory, and especially choosing married women or having a different social place for married women. So you have this whole culture in the factory going on. And part of it too was, and how is everybody dressed in that scene? Are they all, they got their uniforms on, which they use for hilarious purposes, right? The hat, for issues of cleanliness and that sort of thing. But also, Robertson points out that it's kind of making this standardization that doesn't necessarily, the appearance is for cleanliness, but it's also to make things more regular. And so some of the women factory workers were like, this sucks. I don't want to wear a stupid uniform. So there was resistance against that. And then things like jewelry, beyond just the clothing, like what jewelry women could wear, and even wedding rings and that sort of thing, and you could be, docked for not wearing the right thing. So it's very much a effort in controlling that whole body that's there. Your management of time, the actions that you're taking, and the very way that you're presenting yourself. It's a highly controlled environment. And then Ethel mentions this early on, like she gets switched to a different section because what was she doing? She was squishing them to see what was in the middle. And part of the rebellion that you read about with these factory workers is, that very thing of popping them into your, having a little break, having a few chocolates. And people, what are you doing? And I'm eating chocolate. And we talked about the demanding production targets that, especially with factory, and it moves to this sort of thing of an assembly line, and you're getting the chocolates in and you're putting them in the box and doing it that way. Some of it, like this picture down here, is you have your boxes of the formed bonbons and they're putting decorations on the outside and then putting them into the paper boxes. And so you hear in the interviews accounts of these increasing demands for production, and things like, well, the box wouldn't quite fit together, and that was really annoying, and I hated doing that thing because it's almost an unworkable situation. And then these couple of issues are incredibly important as far as women's place in the workforce, right? So it's a majority workforce of women, but what chances, how much stability? It is thought of as a good job, a good paying job, despite, whatever issues you might have about problems with the actual work itself. But part-time, a lot of it's part-time, seasonal work, hire extra workers during holidays, or for big events that are going on that have increased demand, and then there you are without a job. And then these are all sort of the work flow in the workforce with all of these sort of parallel sorts of activities. And so how can you ever move up in that without actually being part of the factory owning family or something? It's just, there's no chance. It was seen as a place to cultivate this person, the worker, in all sorts of ways. And it's clear from those monthly newsletters produced for the workers that women were doing all sorts of other things, using that job as an entry point to do other sorts of things, like especially missionary activity. And so some were going abroad and some were doing local work and being active above and beyond their 10 hours or so with the factory. Okay. Now, the other issue that Robertson brings out is this issue of race. And we've all seen it in some ways. So who's the whole workforce for Roundtree? It's these African or West Indian cacao farmers, a lot of them women. There's very little recognition or emphasis of that in the factory in England. The population in York is, majority people from there, families who have been there for a long time. They're of York, they've been to school in York, their generations of their family are from there. So she interviews a few migrant workers from Malta, one from Africa, and I can't remember the third one. Oh, Chinese, Asian. So you have a little bit. Yet the sort of ideas of blackness versus whiteness definitely creep in different ways. They're present and being, I guess, part of the conversation, you could say, in some ways. And she describes several instances of minstrel shows. So this is in the early 20th century when this is going on. So these white women are putting on minstrel shows. They're dressing up with blackface, and it's not that this is an amazingly popular form of entertainment in England as a whole, but it's something that, in this particular case, they're performing that themselves. Some of it's on TV, and then you also have, this racist kind of imagery coming as advertising for the product itself. And so, what's the contrast here between black and white that you see? What are the main differences? Thinking about race. Is it inclusion? Embracing difference? Go for it.
I'd say it's not.
Uh-huh.
Just like the what's the white dominance and the black allegations, and there's a big contrast. It's just talking about it separate.
Uh-huh. And if, yeah.
I was gonna say, not even using proper English, like the girl, she's talking.
Yeah, she's not right. And you'll see other ads with white children, and it's grammatically correct. So there's this sense of this, some scholars talk about it as tropes of primitivism. Like there's this uncivilized, undeveloped sort of, and who are they? They're black, and we've got to whiten them. Right? We've got to civilize them. And so with the dark cacao, dark cocoa, you add the milk, which is that bland taste that Kevin was talking about. Or is he? Or no, but white. So it's envisioning Englishness as being white. When is it actually? I mean, is this a white company in its totality? No. But it's seen as this white.
I don't understand this. Why did they put a black girl on that thing?
Yeah, did y'all hear her question? Why did they put a black girl? What's this ad doing? Why do you think they're doing that? Who's it trying to appeal to? Is this an ad for black people? Children? And particularly what? Yeah. Huh? Black children? Do you think this is for black children?
I don't think it is.
So who's it for? What are they trying to appeal to? It's hard dealing with images like that, but it's an important thing to truth. You've got to recognize it and talk about it, and see, what's going on with that. Because about it says so grateful, so genial, so good. So what are they saying is grateful and good in this? Quaker Roundtree does what? Yeah, tastes good. Do you think this is for adults? It's aimed at adults? Aimed at children? Oh, come on, guys. It's, what time of day is it?
Probably morning.
Yeah, because the bird's eating worm. So it's playing on that. What were you going to say, Alan? Were you?
I would say, through the cartoon and the bird, I would say it's more appealing to children in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be in the morning paper, like that's how they communicated? Maybe an ad?
These are cartoons and ads that were in all sorts of newspapers and magazines. I mean, popular, generally popular, yeah.
I'm not exactly sure who it's, what age group it is advertising to. But I think it's just for people who are like going to work, which could still be children, especially if it is aimed at black children. Because it's comparing the early bird to like her.
Getting
the
up.
early bird's worm to a person getting like sustenance for the morning.
Yeah. She's getting up, she's getting ready for the day, and what is she going to consume? What's really nice, what's good is a cup of Roundtree's chocolate. Would this be aimed, do you think this is aimed to appeal to migrant workers? Yeah. And Robertson talks about this whole issue even of acting differently, assuming that somebody isn't going to be able to understand, you're not going to be able to understand their accent, or they don't speak English or something. So, kind of these subtle ways of racism. Yeah.
It's certainly different than a lot of modern advertising, that it's not what it's targeted. It's not obvious to me.
Yeah.
Well, mainly, like, the main reason why I asked about it is that if we're supposed to be racist and we don't like them, black people, why would we put them on our ad?
Well, that's the question. So why, yeah.
I think if it's for white people, it's showing that, like, look, this is what all the black people that are doing all your hard work during before they go to work all day. So if you need to like, sit in an office and do a white person job, then this cocoa will definitely help you do that.
And is it showing that there's civilizing black people? Is that what it's supposed to show?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that, of civilizing, an element of showing, yeah, it even appeals to people who aren't as sophisticated or something. Yeah.
So basically, like, Roundtree is just so good that, like, it does miracles for black people.
Well.
So it's like, you should like it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, so I think what's really like the deviousness in the racism is that this is playful. It's supposed to be sort of playful and lighthearted, and seen at that time as something acceptable. And so it's saying all those things. It's acceptable to depict people this way. This is the right sort of place. This is something that kids should realize. But the front message, the message that they were probably trying to actually communicate is that it appeals to a lot of people. It's really good, and it's great for first thing in the morning, and kids will like it, and it'll make them happy. But the real, like the bigger context, the bigger message is really entrenched sort of racism, where this is the only image of blackness that comes in to this company that's built on black labor, a huge proportion of black labor. Yeah, and the phraseology too. I can't remember what the quote was from, actually, the particular context, but it's really that the white milk is civilizing the black purple. It's improving it and making it better. Okay, so that's it. More to think about.